Good evening, Devi, and welcome to Design Dialogues hosted by Fablis. This is your host, Bhavya, and today we have the pleasure of speaking with Devi, the managing partner at MUA Architecture and Placemaking in Georgia. Just to give a brief introduction about your studio, MUA Architecture and Placemaking is a Tbilisi-based architecture firm with over a decade of experience in architecture, urban design, and spatial planning. Led by Devi, MUA focus on creating innovative, human-centered, and functional spaces that enhance communities. The studio's approaches combine context-driven design, technical expertise, and collaborative thinking. Working closely with international partners, MUA has contributed to major projects, including the commercial offices for global brands and other hotels and residences. Their work reflects a commitment to transforming environments into meaningful and livable places. So thank you so much for joining us today, Devi.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So before starting the questions, I would like to inform you that this interview will be published on the website of Fablis. So sign up to the Fablis website and you'll get the access to watch this interview. So shall we proceed with the questions?
Please.
So first question for the day, MUA emphasizes on the lateral thinking and the preserving the perspective and the patterns of that are not obvious in the architecture eternity. Could you elaborate on how this approach influences your design process and design making in complex urban projects?
I would say it's definitely the way we are approaching the design, but not only design, the founding partners, I think that's our way of thinking. We're being critical of everything in the beginning and then we try to investigate it further. But lateral thinking wouldn't be the only way how we approach the design. We have multi-layered approach to the design process, which is definitely data driven as well as very coming out from the very thorough research into each field and how it shows in our design. I would say first thing that one could notice in our portfolio, it's very diverse. It's very diverse in terms of disciplines as well as in terms of style or overall approach to the design. We adaptive reuse, and we quite often in our commissions we suggest adaptive reuse for our projects, and we have few examples in our portfolio which are really successful. We use lots of we use unconventional materials when we can. It's one of the competitions that we won for Tbilisi, one of the largest wine manufacturers in Georgia. We designed a building with rammed earth, and for the building size, it's an exquisite design, and for its philosophy, it's also very suitable in this case. We try to involve into programming and the brief and work with our clients in the pre-design stage. That's also the critical approach that we take, and it shows very successful when working with our clients. So I think to summarize, this is how lateral thinking and this approach is shown in our works.
So, Devi, the Fabrika project, it embodies a very powerful transformation from an abandoned Soviet-era factory into a thriving culture and a creative hub. What were the biggest challenges in balancing the preservation of the site's industrial heritage with the need for the contemporary functionality and the vibrancy for the project?
I think, first of all, I think it's obviously industrial heritage is one of the things that we value in our city. So our company has done very large research into industrial heritage. But in this case, in Fabrika's case, I think the main drive was to preserve the building. Well, some of its elements are very important. Mostly it was about preserving the building because of its sound structure and because of its history and the people who's been through that building throughout the time. In Fabrika's case, there was no much value in the industrial architecture that was there, but for us, it's very important to minimize the construction footprint, and we equally find it fascinating to work with an existing building because we feel that there is The buildings have the soul because of their history. Giving it another life is something that we find very important. And also from the practical side, it can save the budget on the project, and it really proves to be successful. And people tend to like it, and we really enjoy working on the similar projects. So I think these are probably the important parts how we got to preserve the building, find the new use for it. We also, in case of Fabrika, we also designed the concept around the building and its new functions. We worked with the investor, and who is not our partner as well, to develop the concept for the development itself. So we started from very early stage. I would say we invented the project, and then we found the investment for the project, and then we did the design. I mean, we came up with the concept, and we did the design. We even overlooked most of the construction.
So, Devi, the adaptive reuse of Fabrika integrates industrial rawness with the sense of warmth and the social connectivity. How did the design team approach materials and textures and the spatial organization in terms to create an inviting yet authentic atmosphere in the project?
It's we let I think what we did in the beginning is we let the existing to take the lead. We let the building itself to take the lead, and we introduced the comfort additionally. How this started was, I mean, when normally when you start with the reconstruction projects or adaptive reuse projects, it's the same. You always, especially when the building is old, when it was industrial, you start with one would think to clean it and repaint it, or repair it and repaint it, to return it to the state when it was new and functioning, or make it better, or there can be many ideas. And this is the typical way what comes to a person's minds when you start working on an old building. But at some point, we will ask the questions from our team, from our partners, from the potential contractors. We were talking, and there was always, okay, you can't leave that, you need to repair that, you need to cover that. And we realized at some point that we would lose what we liked the most when we entered the building, because we loved an empty space, an old empty space, the way it was. At some point we set the rule not to change anything unless we absolutely had to, because of the future function. And we stuck to that rule, and we thought, okay, you know what? The space looks amazing. And if you brought just a nice armchair, the comfortable armchair inside, and put it somewhere at the corner that you like, you would really feel comfortable. And maybe we can approach the design this way and just stop doing anything. Maybe just cleaning, if the place, just tidying up and introducing what you need for the future function. And this is what we need. And I think it really worked, because we also wanted, the idea for the project for Fabrika was to attract everyone. We didn't have target market. We wanted artistic crowd, but we didn't want to limit ourselves there. The idea was the freedom, and freedom for all. So we thought, in this case, any person of any social background, of any age, could feel themselves like a child when entering an empty space and having the place to sit comfortably. And this is what we did, and I think became one of the favorites in the city right from the beginning, and continues to be so after 10 years now.
With Fabrika as one of the completed projects, and which is established as one of the culture and the creative hotspot, what lessons from this project do you carry forward into your future in terms of urban regeneration and the adaptive reuse industry? Are there any aspects you would approach differently today?
I would definitely carry the philosophy of how we approached working on this project. I think it's absolute, and it can work on any given project, especially in the similar circumstances. But the rest, what would change in the future, it really depends. I mean, you can't copy the whole thing. It's impossible because it was designed for this specific place, for this specific buildings, for this specific city, and so on. So the rest really, I mean, the philosophy is absolute in my opinion, but the rest depends really on location, time, context, and so on.
So any lesson from the project that you would definitely would want to carry to another project, something like that?
It's a very special project. If I could, I would carry always the uh, how we dreamed about it happening. So we never, whatever we made during the process, we didn't have to commit. We would try to improve it while doing it, and we've done it many times, and always thinking about it and always trying to make it better. So that's one of the things I wouldn't change in the future for any type of project. As what we've learned, some of the technical stuff that we could do better, but there is nothing. I couldn't underline that. That happens with every project. So that's how you learn in the world of design, and it's nothing specific to this project. I couldn't outline anything that's specific to the project.
So, Devi, as one of your personal experience with your background in computer science and engineering, how did you integrate technology and the data-driven methodologies in your architecture studio and the projects that you work upon in projects like urban design projects?
It's an inseparable part of our design process. Undoubtedly, data is one of the components that drives all the commissions that we have, all the designs that we do. But I don't think it's because of my background in computer science, because I have hardly worked, even though I studied, I have hardly worked in that field. But uh, I have this passion towards technology. Uh, I've been building all of my workstations a long time ago, and I was obsessed with all the new technology that was introduced. Like it a lot. I would like to not as much, obviously, because of less time, but I would like to familiarize myself with the new technology all the time. And I think we should make the best use of it. But to go back to the question, yes, data is one of the drivers of our design. It's one of the drivers, one of the very important drivers, because we try to do very deep research. This is how we approach our design. So it's leading parts of our design, I would say, not because of my background, I think.
So, Green Cave Botanico project is deeply connected to its natural surroundings. So, what were the key architectural and engineering strategies that you have used to integrate the building into a highly and a very hilly topography while minimizing the environmental impact in the project?
For Dream Botanical project, it's a beautiful landscape to start with. We have adapted our design and the place building to the existing roads and existing cuts into the landscape. This site, it had several buildings on it, which were demolished by the time we got there. Was demolished way before. And there were pathways, some stairs as well, which was connecting the lower parts of the mountain, actually, where the road is, the main road is, to the upper parts of the mountain, where some residential buildings and old hotel buildings were placed. So we tried to use existing cuts into the landscape to place the buildings, as well as some of the parts which was also cut into the landscape as the road. So that saved us from additional excavations on the site and change of the landscape. We have placed the buildings, we have lifted the buildings and used the place underneath for parking, well as the pathway for the cars to drive through, just one-way pathway to drive through. So we used the road for the placement of the building, not to make new adjustments to the landscape, and we still retained the path for the so that the road is still there, and we use the sides for the parking for the building. So with that, we have saved lots of construction space, I think, and we saved the landscape from more interventions, and I think we found a good solution. So topography was also the driver of the concept. The levels of the building are copying conceptually, and in some places are copying and continuing the landscape line.
The project Green Cave Botanico, the House of Wellness references both the Soviet era modern heritage and the contemporary architecture elements. So, how did you balance nostalgia with innovation to create a design that feels both rooted in history and also forward looking?
I think it's modernist in general as the heritage, even though there are lots of buildings which are valuable modernist heritage in post-Soviet countries. One of them is definitely Georgia. But in this case, I think it was our passion to modernist design in general. But there is one other thing that when we started to design House of Wellness, which is one part of the Green Cave Botanical Complex, we already had the previous two buildings designed. So there was already a context on our site, and this was one of the drivers for the new design for House of Wellness. And the rest, it was in our case form. Followed function, because we already had program for each in a brief for each level, which required the specific areas which were different from each other, and then this is how the form came in, and the rest was to the taste that we have, to what we thought would fit with the rest of the context, and yes, this is how we ended up with this design.
The collaboration with international firms like Arup, Buro Happold, and the Chapman Taylor suggests a very multidisciplinary design approach and the process. So, what have been the most valuable lessons from these partnerships that you have learned that you would like to share, and how they have helped you shape the MUA's design ethos?
Yes, we had quite a few collaborations with Rumble, RTKL, Chapman Taylor, and many other firms, architectural or engineering firms. We had different roles in each, starting from local architect to design partner, and I'd say we learned a lot, as we learn all the time working on different projects. Obviously, we have learned a lot with such, and from each it was different. For all of us also was different. What we learned from the companies was approach to the design, the philosophy of each firm, process itself, which is very interesting and very different for dealing with the client. That was one of the very valuable knowledge gained, because those firms are big, with amazing experience and amazing projects in very different directions, in all very different directions, and yet there is so much to admire, actually. Yeah, each time it was a pleasure, and it was the big learning moment for us.
So, Devi, with reference to the Akhal Daba private house project, how does it demonstrates a very deep sensitivity to the natural topography of the site? So, what were the specific site constraints or the unexpected challenges that you encountered during the design and the construction phases, and how did you adapt the architectural approach to address them?
Daba, it's one of our newly completed buildings of a smaller scale compared to the rest of our commissions, but I think I find it fascinating, actually, how it turned out at the end. It's not the highest budget project, but there is, I mean, being inside in the building, you can feel how it is exposed to the environment, and how it is the inside space really absorbs everything that's outside. I mean, because it's a beautiful nature and it's a beautiful place itself. What makes us happy is how our client loves the place, and we can, I mean, we had many discussions. One could tell that Well, the constraints of the site, it's a very stiff landscape. To adapt our building to the landscape as well, not to disrupt it too much. But we also had to make the building itself comfortable to use for the client. So we came up with this three-step rule. We moved each volume would go slightly up following the landscape, but we didn't want to have too many steps inside the building. We the different levels and the shifts in the rectangle forms of the interior spaces very interesting, and transition in between with the minimal three-stair rules was also fascinating because it works. I mean, it separates the spaces. It makes them cozy, but it's very easy to move through these spaces, and it was very. So in terms of challenges, also because of the stiff landscape, the last volume had to be dug into the ground a bit deeper, and it has the second level as well. Is the bedrooms on the upstairs. Main challenge here was to do obviously to make the building comfortable for use, and also to readapt the landscape to the waterways so that the rainwater would flow back to its natural roots. So those were the challenges. The rest was also very technical, waterproofing and so on and so on.
So, Devi, going to the last question for the day. So, looking ahead, how do you see the role of architecture evolving in the shaping cities and communities? And what legacy do you hope MUA will leave in the built environment? Additionally, what advice would you like to give to young architects and professionals who aspire to create a meaningful and an impactful spaces in the architecture industry?
Well, I think future of architecture should be not adapted, but more of a synchronized with the environmental, social, and economic dynamics, and it should respond to the say human needs and future cultural shifts. I think this is the main thing that architecture should do. It should be definitely human-centered and more grounded. This is how I see architecture in the future, and also for the future architects. We're living in a very interesting times in terms of the technology, which are going to be changing the future of many professions, and most definitely the architecture. For the future architects, I would definitely recommend to stay tuned to the new technologies, especially to the artificial intelligence, learn to work with it, study, as all the architects do, study the history of how architecture have developed during the time, and definitely study what humans need, and study more, pay attention to the social needs and studies done in those fields, because I think as architects in the future we will be leading. We can become a bridge between the technology and the humans. And this is how I see our place in the future as an architect and for future architects, because most of the design be driven by the technology. That's my opinion, and will be led by data. Because artificial intelligence and the new technology is driven by data, and if we think about it, I mean, what do we have as knowledge? I mean, what do we have as architects? It's our knowledge. It's our knowledge of architecture. It's the practice that we've repeated many and many times. So it's definitely the data that we base our knowledge on, and also our instincts, our taste, and so on and so forth. So data part will be replaced by the technology, and what's left, I think, is our instincts and the taste and knowing humans and what they need that will keep us in this profession for longer, and we could be a good bridge between the technology and the other end, which is humans in this profession.
Maybe that was the last question for the day. Thank you so much for giving your precious time. It was a pleasure to have you here. And don't forget to sign up to the Fabulous website. Thank you so much, Devi.